Hello again. As I said at the end of the previous video in this playlist, we're going to go through this chapter of the book by Gregory Williams, The Covenants of the Gods. This is chapter 3, I believe, in that book, which is, it's the same that I showed you yesterday in the spiral bound book form. This book is free online, and I'll post the link in the video description below. I'd also recommend, in the last video I also posted a couple of links to a couple of George Gordon's radio programs that covered citizenship and denizenship, and I would highly recommend you listen to those. Again, I'll post those again in this video as well. But I thought before we started tearing this apart and looking at it, I wanted to show you this little picture here of the true political spectrums. Most people have been indoctrinated into a fallacy of a right versus left paradigm, and they put some of these on the right and then they put some of these on the left, and that's not true. Okay, you're going from the far, we could say the far right, as being absolutely no government. Form of government, and the other way of looking at that would be absolute self-government, where this natural law, like we saw in one of the earlier videos, that Abraham was keeping all of the law of God without having it codified. It was written on his heart. Noah, all the righteous men, the righteous patriarchs early in Genesis that kept the law, had it written on their heart, and they were able to totally self-govern. They didn't need a civil government to know what was right in all their interactions with other human beings. Now, the other side of this is where you have absolute government control. Now, that either comes through conquest or consent. And most of the time it comes through consent, because as we've seen in these videos, that's how you get people to stick with the program. But all of these isms are over here on the far left. Now, this, whoever created this also put in princes, kings, dictators, etc. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that just depends on what the prince, the king, or the dictator decides to do. Because we could technically say the God of creation from the Bible, this Yahuwah, Jehovah, whatever the name, however you pronounce that name, that his kingdom government is a theocratic dictatorship. He's the king. But that king, when you read that law, he gives you absolute free will choice. Now, he does specify things like, don't do this and don't do that, and these instructions for us. And if we violate these instructions, he's basically saying, look, there's going to be a consequence here. If you keep these laws, you're going to be blessed. You're going to have abundance. You're going to have happiness. You're going to be able to keep your property. You're not going to suffer much. You're going to be very content. When you violate these laws, you're going to bring natural consequences upon you that are going to cause you strife. And God doesn't have to do anything. Those consequences are just natural. All right. Let's look at the environment, for instance. All the rage about global climate change and things like that. Well, there's a lot of other factors besides humans contributing to that. But let's just focus on human pollution. One of the very first instructions God gives us very early in is to dress and keep this creation. Are we doing that? Or are we in these corporate bodies over here to the far left, like Monsanto and DuPont and all these corporations from other civil law nation states all around the world, polluting like crazy, and the effects of that, the pollution that gets dumped into our air, into our soil, into our water supply, has dramatic health effects on everybody on this planet and on the the other species on this planet. You see, we're not dressing and keeping it. So the natural consequences, God doesn't have to do anything. He's just warning you, look, you do this, here's what's going to come back to bite you on your own butt. You know, if you want to have the different types of sex that God says, you really shouldn't do this. The natural law will put in all of these little microbes, the bacteria and things like that are going to come back to bite you on the butt. We call them sexually transmitted diseases. All right. So if you practiced, just the type of consensual, monogamous sex that the Bible recommends to people, you would never, ever have to worry about any kind of form of sexually transmitted disease. So the consequences in the Bible are just automatic. They're built into the system. Jump off a roof. That's kind of a stupid thing to do. Gravity hurts. Why? Well, because it's to eliminate the morons out of the herd. And that's the other problem with this system. This system is protecting the morons because they're obedient taxpayers. So we don't want any moron to die because they feed the system. So now you have a problem with population, and you got a problem with a bunch of people out there that have absolutely no common sense. Now, I'm not advocating, but a lot of that has to do with the education system. They want you dumb morons, taxpayers, because this is what they need, the ones that are controlling this, and the minions they have as the managerial classes within these systems. You got a ruling elite, you got a managerial class, and then you got the plebes at the bottom, the taxpayers, the human resources. And that's where 99% of the people, 95%, 4% are the managerial class, your politicians, your elected rulers, and then you got the elite at the top that actually run and control things. So, this is the true political spectrum. Now, where does God's kingdom fall in here? Well, somewhere over in here. You got some rules to follow. How many rules? Well, the Jews, that keep track of the Torah, they say there's 613. Okay, whatever. But how many laws do you have in your civil law nation? Tacitus, the Roman historian, once said, the more laws, the more corrupt the state. Well, in the Bible, the Jews say there's 613. I'll go with that. God can run the entirety of mankind on 613 instructions. Laws. The United States, at last count, I think, had almost 10 million. 10 million laws. Now, again, those 613 that would be over here under the kingdom of God, not all of those apply to you. Some just apply strictly to the priests. Some strictly apply based on sex. Some from females because their body's a little different. Some for males. Some for the elders, the heads of families and things. So there's a lot of, just like over here in all these millions of laws, not every one of those apply to you. If you're not a commercial distiller of alcohol, do any of those laws under the regulating and controlling commercial distillers of alcohol, would those apply to you? Of course not. If you didn't have a driver's license, does the motor vehicle code apply to you? No, of course not. So, but the more laws you have, the more corrupt the state. And think of it this way, the more laws, the more criminals. And criminals get to be regulated and controlled. Look at that 13th Amendment very carefully. It says, involuntary servitude will be illegal except for punishment of a crime. All right. And then voluntary servitude is still completely legal. So that's what consent does. It binds you into voluntary servitude. But with all these millions and millions of laws, there's lots of criminals, and now we can force involuntary servitude on you for punishment of that crime. You see, all over here on the left is all these unrighteous, absolute totalitarian kind of control. Now that can be with kid gloves, where, like in the U.S., we want to pamper you a little bit. Yeah, they thump you some, but they pamper you, and they get you to believe that this is all good. You don't even know you're a communist. There's a video in this playlist about, are you a communist? Would you even know? What the United States has been doing since 1933, when it declared bankruptcy, is moving more and more and more. It already implemented all communism by the end of the FDR New Deal era. It's just been moving more and more towards an absolute totalitarian police state. And you're almost there, kids. You're almost there. And this is all done by consent. So, you're over here. Most of the civil governments in the world are over here. The kingdom of God is over here somewhere. And this is where, if God didn't even give you any rules, you'd be over here trying to figure out total self-government. But God wants you in a nation, because in a nation you have strength and you have more protection. When you're all alone, God will protect you, but it's a little harder to make it in life. So somewhere around in here is where the kingdom of God is, and that's a lot more freedom, allodial ownership of property rights, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. That comes from over here. Over here, you're stealing all the time. You're stealing all the time. Social Security is theft of your neighbors. Your public schools, theft of your neighbors. Just about everything you do over here is a theft. It's legalized plunder, and that's a violation of the commandments. Thou shalt not covet, and thou shalt not steal. And you're stealing as a member of those body politics every damn day. And you just don't realize it because you don't understand what these laws are saying. Okay, so again, citizen in the world versus citizen of the world. Now, this is a play on something that is kind of a principle from the scriptures. The Messiah told his people, his nation, to be in the world, but not of the world. Now, that word world there doesn't mean the earth. Okay? The word world there in the Greek is cosmos. Now, I think a lot of people get confused by this, especially since Carl Sagan entitled his famous book Cosmos, about the interstellar space. Now, Carl Sagan was a wise man. He understood what the meaning of cosmos is. The general definition of the word cosmos is an apt and harmonious arrangement. Excuse me. I'll say that again since I had a frog in my throat. Cosmos, in its general sense, is an apt and harmonious arrangement. Specifically, a constitution, order, government. That's cosmos, that's world. And in this sense, that's what this is talking about. Are you a citizen in the world, i.e. among the people, are you a citizen of, possessed by the world, the cosmos, the apt and harmonious arrangement, the constitution, order, or government? This is a 14th Amendment citizen. You're of the U.S. world. You're a corporate member of that world. You're possessed by it, and you're in it. You're not only of it, you're in it. But denizens, that original citizen, the inhabitant that's not a corporate member, is only in the world. He's not of the world. So this is a very good title, and there's some very good information in here. Like I said, some of the information we went over yesterday will be in this book, but I thought we'd kind of cover some of this because it's very good, and I encourage you all to go get the file and read it for yourself. Man's basic need for government stems from his inability to govern himself. According to the beliefs that have come down from us from antiquity, man should be governed by his divine creator, who wishes to write his laws upon man's minds and upon man's hearts. But history clearly shows, from Saul to Caesar and Harold to Bill, that men in general have always rejected such a seemingly abstract spiritual relationship with the Creator. They have often opted for a more secular form of government, finding an imagined stability in laws and statutes, whether written upon stone or parchment, and the charismatic personalities of the world with the comfort of their seducing promises of success, affluence, and indulgence. Nay, but we will have a king over us. Samuel 8:19. In the time of Samuel, men begged for an earthly king, but they were not so arrogant as to believe that they had the personal wisdom to choose their own leader. Men have often relied on the divine right of kings to make such decisions, with an occasional bloody war or revolution to sway the influence and divert succession in one direction or another. Today, we have molded with our own hands a government according to our own personal image of perfection, to exceed all others in comprehensive scope, political and economic totality, and individual allegiance. But when something goes awash in the proverbial political sandbox, it's always the other guy who is to blame. We have been playing as a species, as humans, and eventually I'll cover that. Human in Ballantyne's Law Dictionary is defined as a monster, a lower animal, sinful man, unregenerate man that will reject this law of God and prefer his own way. So, and we have been playing this Adamic blame game ever since, this biblical Adam. It would be convenient for our pride and the comfort of our conscience to blame the assumed or supposed acts of tyranny by government and its bureaucracies totally on their usurpation of the law. And people do this all the time. But would that be true? Would that be honest? Would that be just? After all, if it is lawful to do with our own what we will, then is it not lawful for government to do with its own what it wills? Ooh, go back and watch that Parents Patre video. If we will not be ruled by God, then we will be ruled by tyrants. And I believe that was William Penn. Let's scroll back. Yeah, William Penn. In order to understand government, it would obviously be important to understand the origin of man's relationship to it. There are many ways to approach the subject and many words that should be examined in order to comprehend the nature of the union of man and government. To begin, let us examine a few words that are commonly misused under the assumption that we understand them. And this is a huge deal. Understanding words. In Webster's, there are numerous definitions for the word citizen. A citizen was formerly a native or inhabitant, especially a free man. The word can be used loosely, a native, inhabitant, or denizen, an inhabitant or occupant of any place. But a citizen may also be a member of a state or nation. Now, there's the footnote on all those quotes there. All quotes end of page 1 Webster's New World Dictionary, page 267 and 392. The words person and individual, which are found in the volume library's list of most frequently misused words, the word individual should not be used in the mere sense of person. The word is correctly used in, quote, changes both in individuals and communities. An individual can be considered on the same level as a community, or at least separate from it, while a person is a member of a community and therefore an intricate part of it. Ooh, now we're starting to get somewhere. Every person is a man, but not every man a person. And man, homo, is a term of nature, person, persona, of the civil law. This clarifies this distinction. There are several other distinctions that should be understood when using the word citizen. The term citizen is distinguishable from resident or inhabitant. One may be a citizen of a state without being an inhabitant, or an inhabitant without being a citizen. Often the terms citizen and voter are confused. A voter is a person who is allowed by law to take part in government. A citizen is a member of a nation. A citizen of the United States is a member of a large society, which we call the United States of America. Remember, a U.S. citizen is a citizen created by the 14th Amendment and Congress and is a federal citizen. This would be like if the European Union created EU citizenship to usurp the member state citizenships like of France and Belgium and the various EU member states. In the United States, citizenship is defined by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution as all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. I believe in the United States of America as a government, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy in a republic. Now that, I'm not reading these footnotes, but here they all are on the bottom of each page. That last quote is from the American Creed, which was adopted by Congress on April 3rd of 1918 and read in Congress. So here's your creed, 14th Amendment citizens. I believe, this sounds very religious in nature, right? One of these days we'll cover the word religion. It doesn't mean what you think it means. That word has been altered in definition to be a synonym of ideology, and originally it had nothing to do with ideology. I believe in the United States of America as a government, my God, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed. Yesterday, or the other day, I think it was yesterday, or maybe the day before, I can't remember which video I put it in, but I showed you where the Israelites consented to Pharaoh to be his residents and inhabitants, and I think they were called what the U.S. calls a resident alien, would have been the status of the Israelites. But they had to pay a tax, they had to pay taxes, they were part of the society, and they were ruled over by Pharaoh. And they consented to that. And then when they came out and God made them a nation at the Mount Sinai, they had to consent twice. And I showed you that from the scriptures. So here, I believe in the United States of America as a government, as a God. Ooh, how many anarchists? I don't know of any real anarchist. An means without. Arche is rulers. Anarchist is that form of government where you're totally self-governing. It's not chaos. Anarchy does not mean chaos. They are not synonyms. Anarchy means without a ruler. So 14th Amendment citizens running around calling themselves anarchists are under this creed as 14th Amendment citizens. I believe, I put my faith, my blind faith in the United States of America as a God, my ruling authority, my mighty one, my sovereign power, my lawgiver, my ruler, my ruling judge, whose just powers are derived from my consent. A democracy and a republic. Everybody says, oh, we're not a democracy. You sure as hell are under the reconstructed 14th Amendment system, you are. It's a representative democracy. You're not libera res publica anymore. Republic is things public, and under a republic, the individual common law free man is libera res publica, free from things public. That's why they're mere inhabitants. They're not of the world. They're not corporate members. The United States federal government is a political society existing within the extended jurisdictional authority or dominion of the original republic or republics. The largest portion of the republic's original authority rested in the hands of the individual freeman, the common law allodial freeman, in the realm of his own individual dominion. The authority of the government of the original American Republic was merely titular, meaning in name only. Remember, I told you, and there's court cases, the individual freeman was not a party to the Constitution. The United States government did not conduct any business, rules, or regulations on the individual common law freeman. You had to become the 14th Amendment citizen before Congress could start to exercise authority over you in kind of a blanket way. Now, before then, you could consent and engage in interstate and foreign commerce, and in that instant matter, you would now be regulated by the national or federal government because it has absolute plenary power over interstate and foreign commerce. But most common law individual freemen didn't do that. They were only customers in commerce. They weren't these commercial business interests that became corporate entities, as time passed, especially after the 14th Amendment. That's a subtle thing that most people miss. The 14th Amendment gave rights to corporations too, because they're artificial persons. They have the same rights under the 14th Amendment. So General Electric has the same rights under the 14th Amendment as Joe Blow, U.S. citizen, natural person. General Electric, U.S. person, artificial U.S. person. Same rights under the 14th Amendment. Ouch. And those guys have a lot more economic clout and control over, legal title to a lot more property than you do. And they live a lot longer. There was limited authority that was vested in the original colonial republics and state republics following the Declaration of Independence. However, none of the authority of those republics could make laws regulating the natural behavior or the exercise of inalienable rights of the freeman without consent. Remember, you have unalienable rights that can't be surrendered, like life. Try contracting your life away and see what happens to you. If you try to hire a hitman to take you out, you're going to be declared legally incompetent, and you're going to have a guardian or a custodian put over you and declared mentally ill. So unalienable rights you can't contract away, but any inalienable right you can have a lien put against. The root word there is lien or alien. Lien really is better. You can put a lien against these rights by your consent. Therefore, the United States government at its inception had no sovereignty, power, or authority to regulate natural rights. It was created originally by the state republics, not the individual people, through an agreement called the Constitution of the United States, made during the Convention of Separate States. Remember, the states were creating an agent for them, not the individual. There was no popular vote of all the electors in America to ratify the Constitution. It was ratified in a convention of the states, and the states sent their delegates, their representatives to those conventions. The people of a state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king in his prerogative. Whoa! Okay, now we're back to being somewhere. That's from Lansing versus Smith, 21D89, and 4 Wendell 920, 1829. Okay, so now see, with that Declaration of Independence, the people of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king in his prerogative. You're back to being a common law allodial free man. In one sense, the term sovereign has for its correlative subject. In this sense, the term can receive no application, for it has no object in the original Constitution of the United States. Under the Constitution, there are citizens but no subjects. Now, this is the original, not the 14th Amendment. This is very clear. This is the first citizen in the title that's in the world but not of the world. 14th Amendment citizens are now subjects of Congress because it's a corporate membership under Congress. For when the revolution took place, the people of each state became themselves sovereign, and in that character hold the absolute right to all their navigable waters and the soils under them and their own common use, subject only to their rights since surrendered by the Constitution to the general government. Now, this is where I'm going to disagree. Now, it's not really Greg. Let's see who said that. This is in Martin versus Waddell, 41 U.S., 16 Peters, 367, 410, 1842. Okay, so this isn't the author saying this. This is somebody else saying this. And I'm going to disagree with this because basically what you have here with land, now I'm not talking about houses, I'm not talking about cars, I'm not talking about that, just the land. There's only one form of property in the law of God that he says you do not have absolute dominion over. And that's the land. He says, I own the land, and you're just sojourners on it with me. So what you have here is you have a property right bitch between two sovereigns. Again, when we set up our own governments, we are usurping and rejecting the Creator as our only sovereign power and making our own laws, and we are basically usurping his throne, e pluribus unum, out of many. We are the one. God's motto, if he had one, would be, out of the one, come, I create the many. See, we're doing just the opposite. We're saying, no, God, we're smarter than you. We're going to do this, and we're going to create millions of laws to regulate and control us. And we're going to do all kinds of binding stuff, too. We're going to turn this into an absolute tyrannical, despotic, overlordship, where you give us all kinds of rights. Even though God retains the ownership of the land, he gives you an allodial title to that land where you have absolute use of it with no regulations. Really, there's not much. There's a few, cover a pit. Don't let's, these common sense things. Say, put a hand railing and a fence if you got a flat roof around your roof if you go up there, so nobody falls off. There's certain rules like that of just common sense safety things that God kind of puts on you. And and then like gleaning, he tells you, when you're growing crops, don't harvest everything. Leave a little in the corners around the edges and all that for the poor to glean. Let them come in and harvest that stuff for themselves. You're getting the bulk of it. Leave a little for the poor to come through. And so if you do these, he gives you basically an absolute allodial title to it, and he only asks for a tenth. He asks you to tithe a tenth of the increase, not the land, the increase. So what you produce with that land is absolutely yours. But he doesn't want the land bought or sold forever. Once he grants you that allotment of land, it's not to be sold. Now, this is outside cities. That land grant to you is absolute, and it stays in your family. Now, if you lease it out, and you have the freedom to do that in that law, you can lease it out if things get hard, and you want to lease it out to somebody else, then it's returned to your family in the Jubilee. or in the Shemitah year, which is the Sabbath year, depending on the lease contract that you make. But that land, God's kind of having dual ownership with you. He's not letting you have absolute because he wants you to respect him and dress and keep it. So he's reserving the right to throw you off of it. And that's what he did to Israel. He said, I'm casting you out. I'm giving you this land, but I'm casting you out when they kept rebelling. And he scattered them all over the world. And he put them into captivity under other rulers. So here today, what we have is two sovereigns. The state of Iowa or the state of Florida or the state of Texas or the state of California is claiming this, what we just read here. For when the revolution took place, the people of each state became themselves sovereign. And in that character hold the absolute right to all their navigable waters and the soils under them for their own common use, subject only to the rights surrendered by the Constitution of the general government. So the state now claims to be the God, right? And they're saying, okay, we're the one that has the land can't be bought and sold forever. You're just going to trade your legal title to somebody else, but it's the state that's owning it. So we have two sovereigns, the state and this creator God, that are in a property dispute. Now we see that when Christ went into the desert for the temptation, and this character that's called Satan or the devil, whatever, he tempts Christ and says, look, all of these governments are mine, or my control. They're mine. You bow down, kiss my hand, worship, proskuneo, pay homage to me, and I'll give you, you can be the viceroy of all this. Now, Christ always rebuked liars. Christ didn't rebuke that. He knew full well that we gave Satan dominion over this planet when we had it. So Satan's been exercising that dominion, and that's the state. The adversary. Satan just means adversary. Who's the adversary to God? We are. How do we do that? We create governments out of our own making and become this Satan. That's usurping God's throne. We the people. Ye pluribus unum. We are the Satan. So the state is saying, no. We're the God that controls all, owns all this dirt. You're sojourners with us as corporate members. You pay us a tribute in the form of your property taxes. You use our clay scarabs like they did in Egypt. And then you got to follow our rules and our regulations. So we got a property bitch. This is what is kind of talked about by the Messiah in what will be when he returns. He's coming back to claim this property and kick these fake sovereigns out completely. That was not his mission the first time he came. Anyway, that's kind of getting a little deep. But now you're starting to see this picture unfold. This Bible has nothing to do with what these religious nut jobs, these ideological freak shows talk about. This is a book of law and how we have a relationship with man and these things we create called corporations, governments, whatever, and how they screw everything up when we reject the law that's in here. That's a book of government history. And it's a very honest book about, hey, here's what's going to happen to you. If you read that and all that historical record, you'll see this titular cycle in Israel over and over and over again in that book, like I mentioned in the previous video about the Tytler sequence, from bondage to freedom and blah, 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 and back again. And that's what this whole thing's about. And we're deep in the bondage of Egypt. Okay, the federal government originally operated not by right, but by privileges granted to it by the people or the states. The people may continue to grant more and more privileges and even right by their application and participation or their apathy and sloth. Whoa. You're supposed to, God says, educate your own kid. What do you want to do? I don't want to do that. I want to send them off to some state-run public school to educate my kid. The government has no inherent sovereignty within the 50 Union states. The Congress can exercise no power which the sovereign people have not entrusted to it. All else is excluded. Footnote 11. Juilliard versus Greenman, 110 U.S. 421. Now again, remember, that's constitutionally true. But remember, I made a video saying, how do we circumvent a constitution constitutionally? By contract. The Constitution allows that. Article 1, Section 10, no state shall, ... make any law impairing the obligations of contracts. Contract law is superior to constitutional law. As stated by the Supreme Court Justice Field, there is no such thing as power of inherent sovereignty in the government of the federal United States. In this country, sovereignty resides in the people, and Congress can exercise no power which they, the sovereign people, have not by their Constitution entrusted to it. All else is withheld. The original states, now again, this is all talking about this pre-14th Amendment stuff too. Some of it still kind of applies. I mean, it still does apply, but it's been usurped by consent. As Paul Warburg said in a Senate hearing sometime, I think in the 50s, we will have world government, whether by conquest or consent. Well, they don't need to use conquest. They're using conquest in certain places, but it's coming by consent most of the time. So the original states, finding their limited authority and dominion inadequate, vested some of their rights and duties in a separate governmental organization called the United States. So, in other words, the states who had this sovereignty after the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War, and it was the king that rebelled, not the people in America, they wanted an agent to provide certain services for all of them equally, instead of each one making the rules. They wanted to do these, so like coining money, immigration and naturalization, war. It'd be easier to do that from a confederation state, a federal state, than from each individual state. So that was the motivation. And it's not a bad motivation. If you're going to go and set off to usurp God and create something, that's fairly good, this was okay. But remember, we talked about that too in Deuteronomy 17:14. Where'd they screw up? God said, if you're going to reject me, here's the rules you need to follow to make sure that your system that you're creating for yourself is as close to mine as possible. They got one of the 5 in the Constitution. The other 4 they completely ignored. The original states, finding their limited... Okay, never mind, we read that. Today, in the United States, its citizenship is a political obligation, depending not on ownership of land, but on the enjoyment of the protection of government. All these benefits, subsidies, franchises, immunities, protections, bailouts. Did you accept your bailout check from the government during COVID? If you did, you're saying, you're my God. I love you. Thank you so much. You keep throwing your table scraps at me. And it binds the citizen to the observance of all laws of his sovereign. Wallace versus Harmstead. Originally, citizenship did not include the title or sense of subject, but later in the United States, we see a citizenship binding subjects to the laws of a sovereign under the 14th Amendment. You change your God, you change your law. You change your law, you change your God. A sovereign is one who exercises supreme power, a supreme ruler, a person having the highest authority in a state as a king, emperor, queen, etc., monarch. A sovereign makes law. Now, individually, let's talk about this sovereignty thing, because I hear a lot of these patriot nut jobs out here saying, well, I'm a sovereign citizen. Not realizing that's an oxymoron. Now, we are no more sovereign the only, let's put it this way, the only sovereignty that we have individually is over our own free will choices. My sovereignty stops with me. I have no sovereign authority over you by an inherent right in nature. Now, if you want to contract with me to become my ward, my employee, my servant, then my sovereign will rules over you. Remember, contract makes the law. If you want to consent for me to be your master, your lord, your employer, well then, now I can rule over you. My sovereignty does, in the instant matter for which we contract, my sovereignty extends over you. Ooh, you see how this, it's all the same, kids. It's all the same. I learned this the hard way too. So don't think that I'm some brilliant guy. I had to learn all this by the School of Hard Knocks. I got a little revelation, but I trust more in the educational process of revelation now than Hard Knocks, because I'm getting too old for the Hard Knocks. Constantly bearing in mind. Now this was by Andrew Jackson, one of the populist presidents of the United States. He's telling you the truth here. He says, constantly bearing in mind that in entering into society, individuals, remember that definition we kind of talked about earlier, must give up a share of liberty to preserve the rest. Okay, you got to clip some of your sovereignty, your rights, and property or whatever, your ability to choose. The Bible calls this exousia. It's the highest word in the Greek language for the absolute power of choice. The 14th Amendment uses the word citizens as a word denoting membership. Membership. As opposed to the former use of the word, which denoted merely an inhabitant. This is not to say that there was not citizenship of the United States prior to the amendment, for there surely was. The 14th Amendment was an across-the-board offer of citizenship as a member of the United States federal government. Remember, a contract has 4 elements. Even if we don't call something a contract, and we do this a lot, we don't call everything a contract, but anything that has the 4 elements of a contract, offer, acceptance, time frame, and consideration or reciprocity. So right here, the 14th Amendment. Remember, you can reject this. It's an offer. They can't force this on you. It's all voluntary by consent. An offer. Hey, come and join our club. Here's what you'll get. All you got to do is surrender some of your stuff. Reciprocity, tit for tat, this for that. Prior to the 14th Amendment, no private person has a right to complain by suit in court on the breach or on the ground of a breach of the Constitution. The Constitution, it is true, is a compact. That's another word for contract. But he is not a party to it. The states are party to it. And that's from a Supreme Court or a court case of the Supreme Court of Georgia, Paddleford Fay and Company versus Mayor and Alderman of the city of Savannah in 1854. This was prior to the 14th Amendment. Do you have the same rights as citizens of the United States by virtue of the 14th Amendment as do natural citizens of the Republic in which the United States exists? Ooh. That's a very good question. Because now we use this word rights in different ways now. Because your civil rights under the 14th Amendment are franchises and immunities and all these different things, privileges that the government grants to you. So are the rights, the civil rights that you have, these privileges, immunities, franchises, etc., that are granted to you under the 14th Amendment, which the government can regulate and control? Just think about your Second Amendment right as a 14th Amendment citizen. Do you think those guys back in colonial America before under the Declaration of Independence, did they have all this trouble that you have today? Now, I will mention this. A lot of people miss this. A righteous man does not conceal weapons. If you want to conceal a weapon, you've always had to get a permit from a superior because that's an illegal activity. That is not authorized. Concealed carry is not authorized in this law. You got to open carry. That's the sign of a righteous man. I'm not going to hide my weapon from you. I'm going to make it so you can absolutely see that I'm toting. If the original concealed carry, why it became something that we classified as illegal, unlawful, a trespass, or a tort, was because who wanted to conceal weapons? A righteous man or a thief, a con man, a usurper, a thug, the unrighteous. So that's a legitimate authority under civil government, is to issue concealed carry, because the person who wants to concealed carry is being an unrighteous man. Open carry is how you behave righteously under the natural law. Honor, right? In Twining versus New Jersey, and we'll read through this and I think we'll stop for today and we'll pick this up. In Twining versus New Jersey, due process seems to take on a distinction separate from what many people believe to be the law today. Here we go. Twining versus New Jersey. Right here. The right of trial by jury in civil cases guaranteed by the 7th Amendment, Walker versus Savenay, 92 U.S. 90, and the right to bear arms, guaranteed by the 2nd Amendment, Presser versus Illinois, 116 U.S. 252, have been distinctly held not to be privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States guaranteed by the 14th Amendment against the abridgment by the states. And in effect, the same decision was made in respect to the guarantee against prosecution except by indictment by grand jury contained in the 5th Amendment, Hurtado versus California, 110 U.S. 516. And in respect to the right to be confronted with witnesses is contained in the 6th Amendment, West versus Louisiana, 194 U.S. 258. In Maxwell versus Dow, Supra, where the plaintiff in error had been convicted in a state court of a felony upon information and by a jury of 8 persons, it was held that the indictment made indispensable by the 5th Amendment and the trial by jury guaranteed by the 6th Amendment were not privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. And those words were used in the 14th Amendment. The decision rested upon the ground that this clause of the 14th Amendment did not forbid the states to abridge the personal rights enumerated in the first 8 amendments because these rights were not within the meaning of the clause privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. We conclude, therefore, that the examination from compulsory self-incrimination is not a privilege or immunity of national citizenship guaranteed by this clause of the 14th Amendment against abridgment by the states. Oh boy. Oh boy. Did you realize that? You're a serf. Everybody jumps up and down, screams and yells, bitches, moans and complains. I've got rights. Now you got privileges and immunities under the 14th Amendment. You've pretty much contracted away access to those inalienable rights. And this last little bit here. It is possible that some of the personal rights safeguarded by the first 8 amendments against national action may also be safeguarded against the state action, because a denial of them would be a denial of due process of law. If this is so, it is not because those rights are enumerated in the First Eighth Amendment, but because they are of such a nature that they are included in the conception of due process of law. Now that you are protected under the 14th Amendment to have equal protection under the law. And the court recognizes that. But why do they have so much power over you? And the courts can rule against you in such a ways when you think you're protected by certain common law, natural law rights. Well, because you've alienated yourself from those rights by your consent to participate in this subject citizenship status and many other quasi-adhesion contracts that you've made with the government. One of the biggies, again, go back and watch some previous videos if you're just starting here. This is not the place to start. Go back and watch this playlist in order. You never paid for anything at law. You can't own anything and have property rights to stuff by using somebody else's promissory note. And if you're under parens patriae or government as father, you're a dependent ward. You're legally incompetent, as proof by your actions to sign up and participate in this 14th Amendment nonsense. There's the biggest sign of a legal incompetent. You don't want to be a free man, because a free man has to be absolutely responsible for his own actions under strict liability. You want to limit your liability. This book demands strict liability. This law demands strict liability. Limited liability is a maritime contract. Okay, so we're going to stop here. And I want to show you one other thing here. I'll pull it up real quick. Let me see if I can find it. I think I've shown this to you before, but I'll pull this up again. This is Nordyke versus King. I think this was in the early 2000s. I need to attach the court citation here. Now, there's a lot of my little comments in here because I've shared this with people and I've put my editorial comments in red here. We are similarly barred. This is the Ninth Circuit I think that's in San Francisco. We are similarly barred from considering incorporation through the privileges or immunities clause. Okay, that's of the 14th Amendment. The clause provides that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. Now, remember what we just read. U.S. Constitution, Amendment 14, Section 1. Under the Slaughterhouse Cases, 83 U.S. 16 Wall 36, 1873, this language protects only those rights that derive from United States citizenship. Okay, these civil rights, these privileges and immunities that are afforded to the serfs of Congress, but not to those general civil rights. Now, again, they're using this term civil rights, but these are what these are your natural rights that come out of the natural law, the inalienable rights. And this is where my note is, which are called unalienable, equals not able to be sold, traded, or given away, life, liberty, and inalienable, able to be sold, traded, or given away, consent, speech, due process, habeas, arms, etc. Okay, so this language protects only those rights that derive from the United States citizenship, but not those general civil rights independent of the Republic's existence. Where did those rights come from? That other God, that other sovereign power. The former include only rights of federal constitutions. Ooh, grants! Oh, I love it when courts are honest. Courts are the only place you can go in the United States to get truth. Politicians spew nothing but lies. All of them. I don't care if you got an R after your name, an I after your name, or a D after your name. Every politician lies through his teeth 24/7. Courts are about the only place you're going to find any truth. And they do a lot of obfuscation to hide it, but sometimes they make mistakes. Grants. That's a regulated license, privilege, and immunity. Or the national government enables. Sometimes they're right in your face. Regulated license, privilege. But not those pre-existing rights. The Bill of Rights merely protects from federal invasion. The Second Amendment protects a right that predates the Constitution. Therefore, the Constitution did not grant it. It's an inalienable right, not unalienable, but inalienable. This Second Amendment right can be contracted away. You can consent. And you did that with the 14th Amendment in purchasing guns in the stream of commerce. See Heller. Yeah, there's some good quotes in Heller too. Scalia was right on top of it. It has always been widely understood that the Second Amendment, like the First and Fourth Amendments, codified a pre-existing right. Again, common law, natural law. It necessarily follows that the Privileges or Immunities Clause did not protect the right to keep and bear arms because it was not a right of citizens of the United States. See Cruikshank. And when we were back here reading there, didn't they talk about Cruikshank in here somewhere? So, I mean, this 14th Amendment citizenship, kids, is really, really nasty. And Rome had the same thing. They had dual types of citizenship in the Roman Empire. And the United States, based on Roman civil law, they're doing exactly what they did in Rome. When in Rome, do as the Romans and the Babylonians and the Egyptians, and that's exactly what you're doing. So, again, we'll pick this up where we left off, and I appreciate you watching. I would, make sure you watch this playlist in order because even though it rambles, there is a little bit of logic and sense into why I put them in the order they are. And remember that as a disclaimer, this is not legal advice. This is merely for educational purposes. You are in charge of your life. You have to make your choices. I am not your guru. I am not your leader. I am not your master. I'm just a friend trying to help you out, give you some information that maybe you've never heard before. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share. Bye-bye.